Well, hey there. I'm Steve Wynn of, various bands, Dream Syndicate, Baseball Project, the Steve Wynn Experience. And I'm very excited to tell you to tune in to Nate on the Vinyl Guide because we're going to talk about, dig this, vinyl.
Hey there, record heads. Make sure to check out bagsunlimited.com for your vinyl record supplies. Bagsunlimited.com supplies record stores and collectors around the world with protective sleeves, archival storage supplies, record storage boxes, protective vinyl shipping mailers, and tons of other durable solutions that'll keep your records safe for years. Just go to bagsunlimited.com and check out their audio and record supplies. That's bagsunlimited.com.
And now, on with the show. Welcome to the Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. Here's your host, the biggest record nerd of them all, Nate Goyer.
Well, hey everyone, it's Nate. Welcome to episode 465 of the Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. And ladies and gentlemen, this week we are honored to have on the show Mr. Steve Wynn. No, not the billionaire casino owner jackass. No, we have the good Steve Wynn. We have the good Steve Wynn today. Frontman of the Dream Syndicate, the Baseball Project, about 15 other bands and side gigs, as well as being a prolific solo artist. Today, Steve and I discuss his extensive music career, the resurgence of vinyl. Steve reflects on his early days working at Rhino Records in Los Angeles and how record stores really helped shape his love for music and his approach to creating albums. We also talk about his recent projects, including his latest solo album, Make It Right, and his autobiography, I Wouldn't Say It If It Weren't True. Those are out and orderable now. I will put links to both of those in this episode page. Now, Steve and I were trying to get this interview to happen in person. Both of us were in Los Angeles a few weeks ago, and we were hoping to actually have this interview inside a record shop, but unfortunately we couldn't get our schedules to align. We're going to have to do a face-to-face another time when we could arrange. But I got to underline the fact Steve's importance to the vinyl record collecting community, and his ongoing support and passion for vinyl is rock solid. I mean, his work with the Dream Syndicate and his solo efforts really represent this pivotal area. I mean, many of the records, especially those from the early years, were pressed on vinyl, but in small numbers, and as a result, have become very rare and highly sought after among collectors. Yet his commitment to preserving the vinyl format for all releases, even up to current day, really makes for a fascinating artist who is in love with the craft, not only from songwriting to being able to present it in its finished format. And I think that'll come through in the interview. I hope you guys enjoy it. And speaking of which, you enjoy records and you enjoy music, well, you're in the right place at the Vinyl Guide. Make sure you follow this podcast in your podcast app. Click that little follow plus sign, and you'll be sure to be alerted whenever there's a new episode. Recently, we talked to John Flansburgh of They Might Be Giants, all about vinyl records and music media, episode 464. And a few weeks before that, we welcomed Henry Rollins to the show, episodes 461 and 462. Fascinating. Henry talks all about his record collection and his habit/hobby of collecting records. We also recently had Blog Dahlia of Dwarves on the show, episode 458. The king of collecting, Mr. Joe Bonamassa, joined us, episode 453. And we even had the CEO and COO of Discogs on the show talking about data and trends in the future of record collecting. That's episode 451 of the Vinyl Guide. Again, those and about 450 other episodes are available for free to enjoy anytime. Just follow the Vinyl Guide in your podcast app and enjoy. All right, with the upfronts done, let's get into our conversation with Mr. Steve Wynn.
Hey there. Hey, there we are.
Oh, wow. Look at that background. Great
Hey,
googly moogly.
Yeah, a lot going on there. A whole lot of stuff going on there. I've covered every square inch of wall here. I moved into this apartment. I live in Queens, in Jackson Heights, my wife Linda and I moved to here about 12 years ago, and we had been living in one-bedroom apartments in Manhattan because, Manhattan's pretty pricey. And let's go to Queens to get more space. And we got a two-bedroom place, and I always wanted to have a dedicated room for my recording, for a studio situation. And Linda said, you can have that room, but you have to absorb all of the CDs, all of the DVDs, all of her two drum kits, which are over there, all of my guitars, and somehow I did it. It's all absorbed here in this room.
You
I'm
played
proud of that.
physical form media Tetris to try to fit
Exactly.
everything in
That's
there.
that's right. Yeah, and and people, can be, huffy about things like audio and analog versus digital and things on iPads. But as one who's on the road all the time and as one who doesn't have space for too much stuff, I kind of like having everything on my iPad. I've got, my entire listening for a 2 month tour, reading magazines, books, everything. And there's something kind of nice about that.
Yeah.
I will
Oh,
de I'll take that over the anxiety I used to feel back in the 80s before I went on tour and had to decide which 20 cassettes I was going to take out on tour for the next 2 months. And I would agonize, like, oh my God, which Stooges record do I bring? Oh, this is too hard. I
oh.
have them all.
Well, the answer to that question is Funhouse, but yeah, I get the problem that you had there. So
You raise a good point.
so it's very clear you love physical form media, records, CDs, and cassettes were a love for you for a while. Now, in this show, we talk about records, collecting, that sort of thing,
I
and
know.
what's really, I guess, I'm really looking forward to this conversation because you were in Los Angeles working at what was essentially the epicenter of the music industry, especially record stores back in the day. Is that right?
Well, I'd like to think so. I mean, I'm sure people can make a case for other various stores, but in my opinion, and a lot of other people's opinion, Rhino Records, where I worked, was the coolest store in town. I mean, I grew up in West LA, and my junior high school was a stone's throw from the original Rhino store, like 2 blocks away. So I
Mm.
grew up shopping there, hanging out there, and I just thought that was, the coolest place on earth. My God, these people here know about every kind of music, and they have very strong opinions and attitudes that go along with it. And I would love to be part of that club someday. And it's funny because I've had a pretty charmed life, and I've got to make a living off playing music for the last 40 years and had a lot of great experiences. But I always harbored this nostalgia for the time when I worked at Rhino Records. I just thought that was, in a way, my greatest period of celebrity ever. I mean, in those days, say in 1981, the year before the Dream Syndicate, working at Rhino, when I went to a club, I guarantee I got more attention than I do now going to a club because it was kind of like, oh, there's that record store guy. Hey, when are you getting in that new, Soft Boys record? Oh, I'm coming in next week. Don't worry about it. Everybody would corner me for, I got to trade in a bunch of records. Yeah, come on down. I'll come in at 10 o'clock. I can help you out. So that was a fun time. And as I say in the book, I was working the day shift each day with Nels Klein, who now is, of course, the guitarist for Wilco. And we talk about that. I think I have more nostalgia for that than he does. I could be wrong about that, but I definitely, yeah, I look back on those as pretty heady times.
Do you still frequent record shops?
I'm sad to say I don't as much as I used to. I'm going to break the hearts of your heart and maybe your followers by saying I'm not as much of a vinyl person as I used to be. My wife Linda is very much a vinyl freak, and she's always getting stuff, and she's got the turntable in the other room. And I love music as much or more than ever, and I'm always hunting down things. I'm into some. I was out to lunch yesterday with a friend, and we were talking about our favorite WFMU DJs, and that's a station out here in New Jersey, a very great station. And he mentioned a DJ to me that I didn't know about, I'm going to mention right now, but I came home and just went and listened to the last three of his archive shows and got turned on all kinds of things. So I mean, it's kind of, it's I'm still curious and want to hear things, but it doesn't happen the way it used to. I'd go into a store and go through the bins, and I forever will have that skill, the dexterity of my fingers where I can go through a rack of records in 35 seconds. And that never goes away, but I don't get to use it that often. Exactly. We all know that one.
Yeah, the muscle memory, the fingers just kind of creeping forward, and yeah, and doing two racks at once. That
Oh
those
yeah.
things,
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
So your musical career obviously is very prolific.
Hmm.
You've had majority of your recordings on vinyl record. Is there any that are not on vinyl? Anything that hasn't been released on record?
Oh, that's a really good question because I really, despite what I just said about my non-dependency on vinyl these days, I still like having all my records out on vinyl. And that wasn't that easy a thing, as we remember, late 90s, that kind of period of time, early part of the century when vinyl had fallen out of fashion. I would still always insist with every record label that you have to put this record out on vinyl. And there were a couple gaps. One was, well, one really glaring one was Sweetness and Light, my solo record from '97, and that was just one that didn't come out on vinyl and never had. And thankfully it came out last year on a Danish label. So I think they're all covered now.
Okay. Did you know
Some
about it, or was that a surprise that you heard that they put it out?
No, he came to me and
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I talked to several artists that counterfeits or bootlegs keep popping up. So,
Oh my God.
yeah.
Yeah, I remember a thing. I played a show in Madrid back with Gutterball back in the early '90s. It was El Sol, great club there, and there was a record store in town that said, "Well, we're recording your show, and we do a thing. We want to put it out, and if you allow us to put it out, we'll give you $200 and 10 free copies." And I said, "Well, what if I say no?" They say, "Well, we'll do it anyway, but you won't get the $200 or 10 free copies." So, well, I guess I have my choice then.
That's funny. Well, actually, you bring up a good point because Gutterball, I think that first album that only came out in Europe on vinyl, if I'm correct.
Ooh, wow. I guess you might be right. And that was actually the case, around, and especially in the '90s, I was mainly a European artist. I
Mhm.
was doing more in those days through a couple labels over there. One was Enemy, who did, I think, three or four of my records, and then another one called, well, Blue Rose in Germany, which they did a bunch of my records. And I was touring there more often. I wasn't touring the States that much for a lot of the '90s. So
Mhm.
that's not surprising. I mean, the US releases back there were almost an afterthought. Thankfully, that's changed. I mean, I've
Yeah.
just in the last 10 years kind of gotten to the point now where I'm touring the States more than anywhere else, which is nice
Mhm.
since I live here.
And so, your new album, this is your first solo album in over a decade, Make It Right. That's on
Mhm.
vinyl. And interestingly enough, there's also a bit of a bundle over at Fire Records. You can get the album and the book.
Yeah.
And was that in the plans to have both of these things come out around the same time, or is it just a bit of a happy accident?
It was a plan. And all props to Fire Records because they've really very kindly and hopefully, I think pretty wisely embraced the book, whereas they could have said, "Hey, it's all about the record," and my book company could have said, "It's all about the book," but they've been working together, knowing that the two projects are connected. The book came first in a way because I've been writing it for the last 10 years and really the last 5 years pretty solidly working on it. And I knew that was going to come out about now. The record was kind of an afterthought in that I just wanted to have a record I could sell on tour when I was promoting the book because, I'm a
Mhm.
musician still primarily. So having music I could talk about on stage and play new songs would be great. And over the period of writing the book, the last 5 years in particular, had been writing and collaborating and recording and things like that. And these songs were just sort of, hanging out with no real, destination, but just, things I would do. And when I wanted to have a record come out at the same time with the book, I just started looking at the songs I had, for lack of a better way of putting it, laying around. And two things I realized. One was it actually made for a cohesive record, and two, they were very connected to the book because the songs were all kind of reflective, nostalgic, honest, very personal, and kind of tied into some of the themes of the book. So I brought it over to Fire Records, really just to say, I'm thinking about pressing this myself, and I want to get your okay before I do that. And they said, "We love this record. We want to put it out." Okay, great.
Mhm.
All the better.
Because normally your records would come out on your own label down there.
No, not really.
No?
I haven't been the primary label. Sometimes I'll stick that logo on the back of a record just for fun because
Okay.
I'm proud of my Down There days, but I haven't been I haven't done, I mean, I have done, I should say, I do self-release records that I make 1,000 copies, for example, and take on tour. I did a solo acoustic record, a solo electric record, um, a couple various live records. And those are things just for the merch stand and Bandcamp and little rarity, um, limited edition kinds of things. But as far as a proper new release kind of record, I kind of stopped doing that because, to be honest, I don't mind the work. I like working. I don't like collecting from distributors. That's something I don't miss at all. I hate that. I hate having to be the tough guy. It's just like not my thing.
Yeah.
I never I had the label from the very beginning. Down there, my label put out the first Dream Syndicate record because nobody else was going to do it. And at the time, I was working at Rhino and I had not only the knowledge of how these things worked, but my job at Rhino was the um, independent music buyer for the store. So I was the one dealing with all of the local indie distributors at the time. And I'll admit it, and I say it in the book, it gave us a really big advantage to putting our own record out because whereas I say now it's a big hassle to go somewhere and say, hey, buddy, you owe me, X amount of money. Back then it was easy because I'd say, so I'm going to order $10,000 of records from you for the store, but you owe me $1,000 for my own record. And they say, oh, yeah, sure, Steve, we'll pay you up, of course, anything you want. I don't have that leverage anymore.
Oh yeah, that's very valuable because yeah, that's the story that we hear a lot is yeah, put getting it out there is one thing, collecting and getting it back in is another.
And that's something I don't, I've been self-managed for the last how many years? Like 30 years. And I don't mind that. I always joke that I can separate that side with making music because the better an artist I am, the easier it is as my job as a manager. And the better manager I am, the easier it is to be the artist. So I kind of can kind of look at those two sides as helping each other. But I've never liked being the heavy. I don't even like selling my own merch at shows because I don't like think, okay, give me the money. It just feels so crass. So that's not my thing.
So let me ask you this: do you have a fake name when you have to call for business things?
No, no,
No.
no,
Okay.
no.
Kathleen Hanna of Bikini Kill, she's got a fake name. I think it's Melissa Anderson or whatever. When she had to
Really?
call and do bookings, yeah, because you don't want to say, yeah, I'm the singer of this band or whatever. Like you don't want to expose it that much. But if you don't have a
Wow.
dedicated booking agent, then you make up a pseudonym. And yeah, I think it
Did
was
she
Melissa Anderson or
did she have people fooled? Was she actually pulled it off and not revealed?
for decades.
No, that's amazing.
One thing that I noticed, and I'm sure it was by design, from a very early stage in Dream Syndicate, the EP has a very similar art to a Yusef Lateef record.
Mhm.
Days of Wine and Roses reminds me a bit of an Ornette Coleman record. The
Oh,
design of the record cover seems to elude to a different. Even how did I find myself here? The design looks a bit like Cannonball Adderley, something else. Is
of course.
that
You nailed that one.
I'm assuming that's from you.
You nailed two of the three. You're right about the first EP and Yusef Lateef. You're right about Cannonball Adderley. Days of Wine and Roses was actually meant to be kind of, and kind of ends up being far removed. It was sort of a cross between The Clown by Charles Mingus and a little bit of Live at the Village Vanguard, again by Coltrane, but sort of take. By then we sort of were adapting things rather than straight ripping them off. I real early on, actually, it was me and Dennis Duck and I were very into, borrowing from jazz covers because we loved them so much. And at the time, they weren't as, done to death as they eventually became. At that time, if you kind of picked up on a Impulse or Blue Note thing, like, yeah, no one's seeing a rock band do that. It was kind of fun, and I kind of regret that we didn't keep doing that. Even having the little stereo thing in the top left, that was
Yeah.
I love that too. And then when we did How Did I Find Myself Here, when we reunited, I think a lot of the idea of reuniting the band and making that record and the ones that followed was let's use this reunion, the second go round, as a chance to reclaim who we were, who we thought we should be, and who we strayed from over time back in the 80s. In the 80s, we began as a very focused, idealistic, and even arrogant band saying, this is our music, to quote Ornette Coleman, and no one's going to tell us otherwise. Over time, just by purely by just wanting to survive at a time when we didn't really think we could keep doing it. We're just only made a couple records. In the 80s, we were kind of trying to do different things to see what might work. I can admit it. Every band's had moments of that. Well, now we don't care. Now we are the Dream Syndicate. Doesn't matter if our records sell or don't sell, we'll do just fine, thank you. So we've been able to say, so while we're doing this, let's be the band now that we dreamed we would have become back in the 80s. And that's been fun. Everything
Right.
has to pass through that test now, whether it's artwork, the sound of the record, the way we do our shows. It has to be kind of true to what we wanted to be from the start. And our
Mhm.
biggest barometer of taste, the one in the band who actually guards that more than anybody, is the new guy, Jason Victor, who wasn't around in the 80s, but was a fan of the band. He'll say, nah, you shouldn't do it that way. He'll bust my balls and we'll have drag out fights about it, but he'll say, let's do this the right way. Let's do this the way the Dream Syndicate would do it. Like, oh yeah, right. Okay, good point.
So he knows the style perhaps more than, from objectively, more than, for instance, yourself, who's sometimes buried a little bit too deep in it.
Sure, me and Mark and Dennis, who've all
Hmm.
been in the band for over
Yeah.
40 years, we have certain, we'll forget things. And also, look, much like when we started, much like, I assume a lot of your followers and things like that, we big music fans. Look behind me. There's like, that's just a tip of the iceberg back there. And we all love music. And Jason, but one interesting thing, by the way, one side note is the Dream Syndicate and the Baseball Project, those two bands, all but two members of those bands worked in record stores. Peter
Mm.
Buck, Scott McCoy, Linda Pittman, Jason Victor, Dennis Duck, and myself all worked in record stores. And we all are that guy. We are all, we know our stuff. We know our history. We know what we like. And that plays into our music as much as anything. Yeah, we've all learned how to play our instruments pretty well. We all know how to make records, but really we're still music fans who enjoy, you know, stamping our music with everything we've ever heard and loved.
Well, that's an interesting bond, having
Yeah.
that, and I'm sure, just you become a particular, or you build different skill sets and maybe empathies in the situation of working at a record store. What do you think those are? A commonality with record stores, or what makes a good record store, or what makes a great one, in your opinion?
I think good curating is very important for a record store. Um, and it's not to say, I mean, for example, Amoeba is one of the greatest stores of all time. I haven't been to the new one yet, actually, but I know we were talking about maybe meeting there, and I'm not
Hmm.
going to time this trip, but Amoeba, all the various Amoebas, but especially the one that was on Sunset,
Hmm.
was incredible because they had so much stuff, and that would go against because normally I would say I like a store like Other Music, which isn't around anymore, but Other Music that was here in New York because it was really small and you could look through every record in the store in about 10 minutes. I mean, they wouldn't carry a single record they didn't believe in wholeheartedly. Same for another of my favorite stores, Sounds of the Universe in London, kind of the flagship store of soul jazz records. I love these two stores because they're just, you know, when you walk in there, anything you pick up pass their test. You may not like it, but you say, okay, this is important. The flip side is Amoeba, which is all great too. And you could never see every record in that store. Or you have to say, okay, today I'm doing only reggae. Today I'm doing only soundtracks. Today it's only
Yeah.
South America. That's it. That's too much. But I do like that. I think that I've been in plenty of stores and even worked in a few where there's so much stuff and it's some good, some bad, but we're throwing it all out there. And that's kind of overwhelming, especially these days. No, I think the greatest, I don't know, the greatest need for music fans these days is the proper filter, the proper again, curator, whether it's a DJ or a record store or a friend of yours or a radio, all these things or a blog or things like that, where you know you can trust them and you know you can visit them, whether it's airwaves, website, brick and mortar, whatever, or over a cup of coffee, and you're going to come away with three new favorite records. And I think a good store is a store that fulfills that, where you walk in, you got a half hour, you look around, you listen a little bit and say, ah, I know what I want to get. And that's
Mhm.
we're always looking for that excitement. And I think that, I think one hallmark of the bands from my era, the bands that came up in the early 80s, your things, whether it's REM or Sonic Youth or the Dream Syndicate or a lot of the bands from that period, we were all music fans first. We were just kind of our what we were doing with our bands was similar to what we would do in a record store or on the radio, which is to say, I love this music and you got to hear it. The difference with the bands was that I love this music and we're going to do our interpretation of it and you got to hear that. And then it was it's a proselytizing zealot kind of approach to music that's how you appeal to the hardcore fans. Look, I've never been mainstream. I'll never be mainstream. I'll never know that world, and that's fine. I don't not it doesn't bother me at all. But I do feel like I've never been in it to make music that was for everybody. I'm in it to make music that 10,000, 20,000, 0.01% of the country, who knows what, will say, that's for me. That's my kind of music. And we had a thing in the Dream Syndicate. Kendra Smith and I would often say this, and she works in a record store also and was a DJ. And we had a thing saying, we just want to be one person's favorite band. And that was a good approach to being in a band. So I just want to be not 100,000, not a million, just one person's favorite band. Because if one person can honestly say, that's my favorite band on the planet, and I really mean it, and I will fight to the death to tell everybody I know, then you've done something right.
One thing that really kind of strikes me from reading your book and of course seeing the movie and knowing your work as I do, there never seemed to be a huge concern, at least from the band, about hits or radio. It was more you were going with instinct, following your gut, doing what you felt was right. At the same time, you probably had a lot of pressure from various labels or management interests that were saying, well, can you do that in 3.5 minutes? Was that a constant push and pull battle in your career?
No, it wasn't. We actually didn't have, I've never been in a position where I've had real pressure from the label. I've really almost never had a label involved in making a record. Even Medicine Show, which took 5 months and cost $250,000, A&M just kept paying the checks. They seemed to think we knew what we were doing, which we didn't at that. We were just starting out. We knew somewhat, but we didn't know how to make a record like that. And it was a trial and error thing that they just said they gave us free reign. So no, I've never felt, there were moments here and then I talk about in the book where maybe in the mid 80s where a label like A&M after Medicine Show said, well, we'd like to hear a single. People would say that. But to be honest, the pressure, like I was saying early in the interview, is mostly what we put on ourselves back then. In that brief period, like the after Medicine Show, the last two albums we made, we weren't trying to go for hits, but we honestly just wanted to keep the gig.
Mhm.
I think there was that feeling, not I need to be rich or I need to be famous or I need to be number one on the charts, but there was a feeling of, wow, I kind of like this job and I'm only 25 and I wouldn't mind if I do it for the rest of my life, but I got to figure out how that's going to work. And at the time, my idea of how that would work would be, I guess we need more fans. Ironically, I think the Dream Syndicate might have not broken up and might have just kept going had we, rather than going for our idea of what would make us successful, would have just said, yeah, let's just go back and make a live one night record and just be as confrontational as we were when we started. But we were young. We didn't
Sure.
know, didn't know, you how to keep the dream going.
Well, it's a complex environment. I mean, there's and of course we've got the benefit of hindsight. In terms of your the ability to do that live record, so you just described something that's a bit like live at Raji's.
Well, I thought
Um,
it's funny. I thought the same thing as I was saying that to you. That crossed my mind also. That for all And I love every record we made in different ways. I think that they're all. I'm talking about the '80s records we made. Um, but we would go in the studio for, like bands would in those days, especially, and spend 2 months, and you know, trying to make it better and better and better every day. And then we go to a club on Hollywood Boulevard, Raji's, and after sharing a bottle of wine and playing at midnight, blast out a set that was the record that most of our fans said was their favorite record, maybe aside from Days of Wine and Roses. It was a record just people embraced and still embracing. Like, you're kidding. That's all we had to do. Just walk into a room and play and be done with it. And that's you wanted that all along? We can do that. But it was a really difficult decade to be a musician. I think a lot of other musicians would agree with me. There's really never been another time like that. In the before the '80s, bands mostly just went in and blew it out. Neil Young would make 3 records in a year. Creedence made 5 in 2 years. Elvis Presley would go in or John Coltrane or Miles Davis would go in and record their new songs in one day and be at the gig by the time, by 8 p.m., whatever. It wasn't it wasn't so laborious. In the '80s, especially, the producers took over and it became this weird search for some kind of perfection that didn't exist. And it was challenging. It wasn't necessarily fun to make records. I've had a lot more fun since because I've just reverted back to every record is just a snapshot of a quick moment and then on to the next one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Live at Raji's is one of those. The Universe Inside is another example of something
record.
that was just
Yeah.
popped out like almost unintended brilliance.
Universe Inside is probably my favorite record I've ever made. I love that record, and it is just an unintended 1 a.m. jam session that was really special, and we then proceeded to shape and twist and turn around, not unlike a '70s Miles Davis record with Teo Macero. We took this raw jam bolt of inspiration, said, okay, but let's have some fun with this now and mess around with it. It was great. It really, I think it just comes down to having a good day in the studio, having just catching hold of something and not worrying about it, not censoring it, not trying to make something that it's not, and just following it, and then get it done and put it out. What Nick Lowe said, bash it out, tart it up later.
So, do you understand your rhythms enough to where when the time is right to go in and have one of those jams, or is it almost accidental?
Hey there, audiophiles. If you're seeking stylish furniture to showcase your stereo and record collection, well, look no further than SidetrackedWorkshop.com. Sidetracked Workshop designs extraordinarily elegant record cabinets and consoles that add sophistication and panache to your music hobby. Handcrafted in the good old USA in the vinyl-loving city of Portland, Oregon, Sidetracked Workshop's designs are a music lover's dream. Made with real walnut veneered wood and brass accents, these gorgeous designs add class and taste to the record room and ship fully assembled and ready to enjoy. Just check out the designs for yourself at SidetrackedWorkshop.com. Look, you spend thousands of dollars on records. Don't keep them in a crate, and don't risk your records on those feeble wooden pegs from IKEA. Your music deserves the dignity of Sidetracked Workshop. That's SidetrackedWorkshop.com. Elegant solutions for the vinyl lifestyle. Oh, and hey, record nerds, don't forget to clean your records with the very best and safest record cleaner, the Groove Washer. Make your records look and sound their very best and store them with confidence using the new Groove Washer Groove Guard record sleeves. You gotta try this out. It makes a huge difference to the quality of your vinyl experience. Ask for the Groove Washer by name at your local record store and accept no substitutes. Or head over to groovewasher.com and use discount code VinylGuide10.
All hail the Groove Washer.
That's groovewasher.com, discount code VinylGuide10. Hey there, all you record nerds. I want to tell you about bagsunlimited.com. Bagsunlimited.com has a huge selection of vinyl record supplies. Whether you collect LPs, 7-inch singles, 78 shellacs, or anything in between, bagsunlimited.com will sort you out. From polyline sleeves to cardboard record mailers to 7-inch storage boxes and archive quality record sleeves, protect your records of any size and shape at bagsunlimited.com. Whether you have a small personal record collection or you're running a massive record shop, you can grab a small supply or even buy in bulk at bagsunlimited.com. And they've got some really incredible, unique stuff. Bagsunlimited.com even has special size sleeves made especially to protect your box sets, storage boxes and sleeves for cassette tapes, protective supplies for reel-to-reel, and yes, even 8-tracks. Just go to bagsunlimited.com, click on audio supplies, and prepare to be impressed by all the options they have. That's bagsunlimited.com.
Do you understand your rhythms enough to where you know when the time is right to go in and have one of those jams? Or is it almost accidental?
I think it really comes down to, at this point in my life, a situation where you have people you want to make music with, whether it's your old friends and compatriots or somebody new you've never met or worked with before, and you kind of have that blind date where you say, okay, let's meet here, let's meet at this undisclosed location and just see what happens. And I think that's part of it. I think having a reason or a situation or just is the main thing, not the idea. When it's quote unquote time to make a new record, sometimes you overthink it. I found for me just getting excited by the company you're keeping and the setting you're working in makes for the best music.
Being able to read the room, understand
That's a big thing. Yeah. It's funny because the Universe Inside was a one late night diversion during the recording of These Times, the album we were making at the time. And These Times was a very difficult record because we were trying to. The weird thing is, for a band that had been around for at that time 35 years, we were making our second record as far as we were concerned, because it was the second reunion record. And second records are tough because assuming you like what you did on the first record, you have that push and pull of, well, do we do the same thing again? Do we do something completely different? How are we going to develop from what we did? And These Times all of us were figuring out the band we wanted to be next. And we had different ideas. And finally we made a really good record, but it was hard getting there. And at the same time, in the midst of that kind of push and pull, we went in at 1 in the morning one night and knocked out this record that was everything we were trying to do but hadn't discussed. Had we just gone in and done that one jam session on day one, we would have been done. We could have just, spent the rest of the week drinking margaritas and eating burritos. We could have been finished with it.
It's like going into These Times, you didn't realize that you gave yourself permission to have that level of freedom, and it came out that one evening that way, maybe reaffirming who's really driving the car. It's you guys. It's to put the anxieties to the side.
We knew we were driving the car. That was no doubt about that. The problem was which the five of us was going to be behind the wheel.
Oh. Well, it's confidence too, I guess. I mean, if I'm reading into it, it's like a little bit of second guessing. It's like, well, there was no pressure on this session. There's no need to second guess.
And second guessing is, it's funny because, when you work with a band or any group of people doing anything, but the group of people you're with, let's say in this case 5 people in a band, will all have different ideas and they're all correct. It's not like, I don't know, developing a formula for a scientific formula. I'm out of my league here when I talk about that, so the analogy is difficult. But there's no right or wrong. It's just different ways to a version of the right answer. So I think it's just second guessing can be a mess. I think maybe that's why, for me anyway, records that are basically live, be it the Days of Wine and Roses or the Universe Inside or the first Gutterball record, or I've had a few others over the year, Melting in the Dark, a few other records I've made where it was basically a first impression live experience often end up being the best ones. They're just you feel the excitement of the moment rather than the fabrication of what you think excitement feels like.
Yeah. Yeah. Being within the moment, I think, is very important. You originally thought your career was going to go by the way of being a sports writer.
Yeah.
And you even had education. You went to, I think, UC Davis for that. How do you think that skill set, that desire, or even those learnings helped your songwriting? I mean, I'm assuming that's a skill set that came in really handy when it came to the book. But when it comes to
Mm.
songwriting, how do you think that helped shape your output?
Well, quite literally, it affects what I do in the baseball project because I'm
Oh,
using
yeah.
similar things with that band. I am a sports writer once again, so it is kind of funny. I think that being a sports writer and journalist in general gave me the appreciation for brevity, focus, and knowing what the story is. What's as we always say in the baseball project, what's the angle? And just like like a journalist would, what are we trying to do here? And I did one thing I loved about being a sports writer is you would go out and say cover a high school football game like I would do often, and then you'd go back to the newspaper office at 11 p.m. and you'd have an hour to crank out the story, and you did it. And this was, typewriters for God's sake,
Mhm.
and literally cutting and pasting and stuff like that. And then you were done. And whatever it was, that was it. And that was a similar thing we were just talking about before that with music, is there's a lot to be said for the adrenaline, the excitement of the moment. And I think I brought that to my book. I think that when I wrote the book, I wasn't laboring over every sentence. I just went for it. I just
Mhm.
started typing like mad. And I've written songs like that, like "Make It Right," the title song of the new album, and some of the early dreams, thinking "When You Smile" and "The Days of Wine and Roses," where they were written in 10 minutes. They're just, yeah, I was excited. I knocked it out. I didn't think while I was doing it about, well, I could do it that way, or it could be this way. It just what came out is what it was. And that is, you know, that's why I love playing live, touring and playing live music so much. I like that feeling of, as you said earlier, trust your gut, trust your instincts, and just no looking back.
Right.
It's the second guessing and the refining that can be exhausting and sometimes be where you go astray. Some people are better at that than others.
And it could dull the result, right?
Yeah.
That spontaneity. There's something to be said for spontaneity. When I do interviews, sometimes some of the artists say, "Give me a list of questions." I'm like, "Well, I'll give you a couple topics, but I really want to hear you react spontaneously."
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, because everything else is just canned and septic, if that's the case.
I hate and it unfortunately doesn't happen that often when journalists say, "Well, I'll send you the questions before the interview." Like, no, no, I don't want to know it. I don't want to know what you're going to ask me.
Yeah,
Just ask it.
I want to hear the human reaction here.
Right, right. I mean, I think that it's fun to be, look, my favorite interviews, and this is interviews fall into that category, I will say. I was
Oh.
interviews that make you think, that make you think in real time, where you
Mhm.
have to actually kind of, you know, you know, ponder
Mhm.
something in a way you maybe haven't before. Like, oh, well, I hadn't thought of that. And you hear the answers coming out of your mouth and say, I'm saying this and I didn't know I felt that way, but I guess I do. And the same thing with writing a song or making music. It's always that great feeling when you can surprise yourself.
Hmm.
Again, going back to the universal side, when we did that and heard back to what we had done, we just looked at each other and said, I didn't know we could do that. Where did that come from? There's no, I couldn't have created that record. None of us could have in a million years if we were trying. And I hear things all over that record where something plays off something else because there's the moment of discovery and surprise because somebody heard somebody else do something and said, what you just did blew my mind, and I'm going to respond to that. And you're going to hear this subtle, slight lag of when I picked up on what you were doing. You can't do that when you plan it all out ahead. And
Yeah.
that's the beauty of improv and the beauty of a live music experience.
Yeah, you can't plan the human response, especially in the
No,
creative field.
no, you can come up with something that resembles a version of it. I've been like a lot of people this week been very, into rediscovering John Cassavetes films and Jenna Rollins' great acting performances. And you look at those Cassavetes films and I believe he had written scripts for those movies, but still you can see people reacting as they go along in really ways that movies don't usually come across, but real life does. And just it's beautiful. Robert Altman does it too really well, where you actually hear people talk in a movie the way they do in real life
Hmm.
with weird, inexplicable reactions and ways of saying things that feel so real because yeah, that's how it works.
Well, I'll also
That's life.
I'll give a slightly lower brow example of Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Okay.
I mean, the
No, it's not
improv.
not lowbrow at all. I love
Well,
Kirby.
I know. I
That's
just,
high art. Okay.
but yeah, just watching the improv of them, you know, they're going somewhere, but you know how they get there is full of twists and turns while they do that. Being one thing I've recognized in your lyrics, and you know, let me know if you feel same or different, is you seem to have a very, I guess, a clear economy of words, and that's what I always credited to maybe the writing background gave you an instinct for, rather than taking two sentences to say something, how to slim that down to a handful of words to get that same emotion out, and it's quite often much sharper, much more focused, and I think more impactful. Is that something you would recognize in yourself, or am I seeing things?
No, I like I try to do I like that style of writing, and I don't always. Sometimes I'll get wordy. I've written some pretty wordy ones too, but my favorite ones I've written and my favorite lyrics by other songwriters are really minimal songs that kind of leave some things unresolved and unexplained. I'm a really big fan of Randy Newman, for example, and his lyrics are really minimal. You realize Warren Zevon too, and is another one, and to go more lowbrow in a way, but not lowbrow at all. The Ramones, the Ramones are another one where the lyrics are so simple and so stripped down and minimal, and yet you hear all kinds of things there. Whether it's you know um, sitting here in Queens eating refried beans by the Ramones, or all those great Randy Newman lyrics were just you you know he gives us all this stuff on Sail Away where there's not much going on and yet there's so much going on.
Hmm.
And I really like that. I've always been a fan of lyricists, and it's maybe not the hippest thing to say, although I think they've been reclaimed in a way. But the lyrics of Steely Dan, which always assumed was more Walter Becker than Donald Fagen, but I really
Hmm.
like their lyrics because they were simple and yet you felt like you weren't getting the whole story. Yeah, I always likened their lyrics, and to some extent also Randy Newman, to looking in the window, looking in a dirty, streaky window and seeing something inside, but you can't quite tell what it is. You're just making out shapes and you're saying, I can see enough to know something interesting is going on, but I can't quite get the whole story. And I like lyrics to do that in a
Oh
way.
yeah.
I don't want to I don't want to give everyone the whole story. I don't want to dispel it all out. It's like, if you find your own way into my song, then maybe you're right and I'm wrong.
Well, you know, I'd be yeah, I agree with that because like a song like Kid Charlemagne.
Mm,
You know, some drug deals happening, something
hmm
bad's happening, but you kind of fill it with your own, you know, your own story, which is probably much more incredible, especially to each individual, than if he was completely put everything out there and spelled it out. No mystery.
Definitely. One of
Yeah.
my favorite lyrics ever. Is there gas in the car? Yes, there's gas in the car. I mean, it's great. That's great. That's the kind of, and maybe that does come from sports writing background over, but I really like lyrics. Chuck Berry's another one who does this so well. Lyrics to sound the way people talk.
Mhm.
Lyrics to feel conversational. That just sound like, oh yeah, that you could have heard that. That's Paul Simon does it really well too. That sort of thing. Look, there are plenty of the Jim Morrison School of American Poets, and that's valid too. But that was never my thing.
Right.
It's not that great a leap, like you said earlier, not that great a leap from typing out a high school football story at 11 p.m. and the kind of lyric writing I do. It's just kind of this is the way I see it. This is what happened, a moment in time, and you fill in the rest or imagine how that went down.
Yeah. Or you could build a character with only
Yeah.
one or two lines. Like,
Oh, yeah.
here's the
Great.
guy. he could make your mugshot disappear. It's like, okay, I think I know who.
That's a great one. That's a great one too. Yes.
By the way, I'm going to go on the record and immediately retract my use of the word lowbrow. As soon as it came out of my mouth, I was like, you know what? Curb Your Enthusiasm is not lowbrow. That's a
Not at all.
it was a very yeah.
And that's why I followed up on the Ramones, because the Ramones you could say is lowbrow, and it's not. That's high poetry.
It's not. So everyone, save your emails, save your social media comments. I admit my mistake. And if you can't accept that, then go fuck yourselves. All right. So let me ask you, Steve, being in a record store or being in a music fan from the very get-go, working in record shops, your career in music, are you surprised by the vinyl resurgence?
I hadn't put those two things together. My thought about the vinyl resurgence and as a former record store employee.
Well, I mean, I guess just.
But no, it's interesting to think of it that way. I guess I'm not surprised, only because vinyl's cool and it looks good and it's fun and all that. CDs were not ever necessarily fun. I do have a very unpopular opinion about this, and I try not to say too much because it breaks people's hearts, but not that I'll be candid here, in that I actually think CDs sound great these days. Early CDs didn't at all. My God, they sounded horrible. CDs now sound pretty good, and I often hear. Yeah, the best way I can judge music is by hearing my own music, because I know how it should sound. And when I hear back vinyl versions of my records these days, it's fine. It sounds like vinyl. And vinyl is a very limited audio response, a familiar audio response, because what we grew up listening to. But to me, CDs these days sound like what I heard in the studio. They're very accurate replications of what I was listening to when I was sitting at the mixing board and what I was hearing in my headphones when we got the right take. So I like CDs when they're done well.
Mm-hmm.
I was speaking earlier about Soul Jazz Records, which is one of my favorite labels.
Oh yeah.
And from the beginning, they were one of the first CD companies that I was hearing that did a really good job of making their stuff sound great. I don't know how they did it, but they really were early on, like doing these really well mastered releases. I'm not missing anything here. Again, I appreciate the love of vinyl. And hey, any way you want to get music that excites you, that's great. I don't like that. One thing I don't like is that vinyl has become this incredibly expensive thing. Well, if you want vinyl, I mean, I have a friend who works in a record store now, and she tells me that kids are paying $50 for Taylor Swift vinyl, and I just think that's horrible. That's not what music is for. It's not a fetish or a status symbol or a keepsake. It's how you process music. But whatever, that's not my cross to bear. I don't have to worry about that. But now on a pragmatic level, as a touring musician, vinyl's a pain in the ass. So it's just it just is. You got it's hard to schlep around, and it's easier for it to get damaged. So here I am. I'm on a vinyl program knocking vinyl. I love vinyl. I take it all back. You can take back lowbrow. I'm taking back anything bad about vinyl.
Is vinyl lowbrow, Steve? Sorry.
I'm not sure what brow it is. It's unibrow.
No, I understand. Look, I hear different things from touring musicians. Some of them say, I love vinyl. Yeah, it hurts the back because you got to carry big, heavy boxes.
Exactly.
But it's, from t-shirts, you have small, medium, large, extra large. With vinyl, it's like, here it is. There's not that you don't have to have all the multiple size. At the end of the tour, you don't get stuck with a box of smalls and triple XLs.
That's true. I know that. Also we were talking earlier about artwork, and I am very into album artwork, and I take it really seriously when I make a record, and that's one thing vinyl's great for. There's a 12 by 12
big
format.
Surface, easy to sign. It's
easy to sign,
yeah,
and it looks nice. So I don't know. It's I'm fine with it. Don't personally. I can't think of the last time I bought a vinyl record. I hate saying this. I'm gonna. I feel like I'd be better off diving into politics and diving into my feelings about vinyl as far as alienating people.
Steve, this is a safe environment.
Oh my God.
Speak your mind and we won't judge you. Okay.
Well, the one thing I will say is, as long as you're enthusiastic about music and you are hungry for it and curious about it and want to know more about it and fall in love with it and maybe even make your own music. I don't, then however you get it is great,
Oh
whether it's
yeah.
whether it's hearing it blaring off your computer screen or, how did we, the people of my generation, get into music? Transistor radios. We had little AM radios. That's how, that's how I heard the Beatles on a little tiny, yeah, radio sitting, under my pillow, as a cliche goes. So I wasn't born an audiophile. I was born a lover of music.
Yeah. Well, and lovers of music, vinyl is kind of where a lot of our listeners triangulate. But look, we understand CDs are important. They were an important step, and I agree with you. Modern CDs sound a lot better than the one when they first came out. I thought I was upgrading, but I wasn't. But now they sound pretty good. Streaming is I think Apple streaming is actually quite high quality, and it's perfect for when you're on the road or you're
Mhm.
portable. You can't always have a record player with you, but we
No.
also do. We love the whole musical experience, the collectibles, and books and tickets and merch, that sort of thing. It's
Hmm.
it's the lifestyle that we have. So yeah, no, there's no shame in saying you prefer something other than vinyl. I mean, that's to each their own, of course.
Yeah, as long as you're listening and absorbing
Hmm.
and getting something from it, it doesn't matter. And like I say, I still have that hunger. It's just not in the form of vinyl. But I'm letting this one go. I feel like I dug my hole deep enough by now.
So speaking of vinyl, are you aware of some of the collectible records of your career?
Oh, of my own records?
Hmm.
Well, the one of the big collectible records for a long time, and I guess still to some extent, is Medicine Show, the second Dream Syndicate album, the
Hmm.
record that we spent the longest making because it's been out of print for ages. As far as vinyl, I don't think it's been out on vinyl since it first came out, and it came out for a moment in time here and there on CD in Italy, a few other places. So I would see that on eBay for a couple $100 and I'd hate that. It's like, oh my God. Hope nobody pays that. That's not shouldn't be doing that. So yeah, a few things like that. Definitely that one and a few singles here and there, of course.
Yeah. So Medicine Show, I think there was mostly most of the vinyl issues were when it originally came out. There have been some reissues overseas. Klimt Records. Are you familiar with them?
I
Or
don't think so.
is
I
that
don't, I don't think so.
maybe it's listed as official?
KLIMT?
Yeah, Klimt. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I'll
Yeah,
look that up.
they had a
Are they
reissue 2014 and one in 2021.
a medicine show?
Medicine Show. Yeah. A
I'll
lot of
look it
times,
up.
the labels like music on vinyl or whatever will license the recording and put them out. I speak to a lot of artists that are like, yeah, I had no idea that record came
Mhm.
out until
Yeah.
someone brought it to a show or something.
Well, I mean, I worked with Real Gone Records. They did on my box set Decade, and they do a lot of that they do a lot of cherry picking from of
Hmm.
things that didn't get reissued, and they do a great job of that. The problem with Medicine Show strictly was we couldn't get the rights back, and I was involved in a legal battle, a class action suit with Universal, with UMG for the last 5 years, and we just got the rights back this year. So for the
Ooh.
first time, 100%. So for the first time since, well, ever, and we own the rights to Medicine Show, so we're just gonna get reissued next year.
There we
Very,
go.
I'm
We got
very happy about that.
exclusive.
Yeah, I'm thrilled about that.
So Universal Music in 2006, maybe 2009, there was the fire. Universal, where the vaults went up.
Yeah.
Was any of your work impacted by that?
Well, I don't know. I haven't, these days, a lot of people, most people, I think, when you can't get the masters, they'll remaster from vinyl or from whatever, and it works out pretty well. I am going to be trying to hunt down the original tapes, so I'll find out. We'll see. I,
Yeah.
I, I I don't know if ours burned up or not. I don't think it did,
Okay.
based on the smallest bit of conjectural evidence, but I think it might be around.
Okay, so that would be the only album that has a bit of a question mark in terms of its impact, or are there other albums where you don't know where the master tapes are?
Oh, geez. Most back then.
Mm,
Yeah. It's funny, I started keeping all the master tapes um after say early 90s. I've generally financed my own records for the last 30 years. I like going in the studio on my own dime or band cobbling together money from gigs and things like that and making the record we want to make and then giving it to the record label saying this is our finished record. Not being involved, if you say from the beginning, hey, I need X amount of money, and they'll say, great, well, we want to hear the songs. I'd rather say, oh, we finished the record, here it is. So I was doing my own records, and I had a storage space in New York with 2-inch tape and the master mixes and all these and everything, every kind of source for the last 20 years. And at a certain point, I did a proper digital transfer of everything through Steve Rosenthal, who ran the Magic Shop, and he was doing a great job. That's his specialty now. Now
hmm
the Magic Shop is closed. He does this kind of digital transfer of audio of analog material, and so I did that, and I realized, this is as good a source as any. There's nothing this is lacking at this point that I would, need to get. So I looked at all these tapes, and one day I just threw them all away, and it was the most terrifying and exhilarating experience. Like I'm not paying to storage things. I'm not gonna, leave this to future generations to find someday and say, what is this stuff all about? No, it's gone. So
Okay,
it's it's been
all right.
I
It's all digital. The analog source is no longer
yeah,
yeah.
and again, it's just different times now. There's time I wouldn't have
hmm
done that, but thankfully now digital's caught up with analog. It just, and I was one of the last people I knew to give up recording onto analog tape. I was furiously hunting down 2-inch tape from whatever source I could for a while there. It's like, no, I'm not going to record on the computer. Well, finally, at a certain point, Pro Tools recording was as good as anything. It was,
hmm
once things become just a fetish, a traditionalist, or whatever for the sake of it, just for the sake of itself, it's kind of pointless. I've never been to that. I like things. I'm a purist if it means it's going to be better in some way, but to be a purist because, ooh, look, analog tape, I don't care.
Yeah, there's that point of diminishing return where you're like, okay, I'm putting in a lot of effort for really minimal or undetainable difference, you know?
Well, and yes, and I will say a great influence on my attitude was moving to New York 30 years
Oh,
back because, when you're living in a New York apartment, all of a sudden all those things don't seem so important anymore. And where are you going to, the line in this house, well, where are you going to put that? Like, oh, I don't know.
bathtub's
I get,
empty.
I get
Uh,
bathtub's empty.
all right. So, Steve, I really enjoyed this conversation. Before you go, I want to talk to you about some of the early records. And I
Sure.
mean earliest, Suspects and 15 Minutes. Can you talk us through those,
Sure.
the creation of those records? Because those are again, very collectible. The start of your career, the first time you were on vinyl record, if I understand correctly.
Yep.
Yeah.
My
Okay.
first two records, both 7-inch singles. And for a long time I thought those would be my only two records I would ever make. I mean, that was a big deal. It was, when we did the Suspect single, it wasn't that common to go into a studio and make your own record. Obviously, bands had done it, were doing it, but it was kind of uncharted territory. And as I often point out, and it's kind of amazing, there aren't many things in life now that are cheaper than they were in 1978. Not a whole lot. I can't think of too many things. Recording studios are. Back then, I remember
Mm.
when I was in Suspects, my new wave band at Davis with Kendra Smith and Russ Tolman and Gavin Blair from True West. We that wanted to make a single. Like, oh, let's make a single. We're music fans. Let's make a. Well, we have to go to a recording studio. Well, there's one in Sacramento. We'll go there. They said, okay, yeah, $1,000 a day. $1,000 a day. Now, again, to put in perspective, you can go to a great studio now for $500 a day, like great world-class studio and make everything you could possibly want. it was so much back then. So we found a guy in San Francisco who had a home studio, again, very rare in those days, and recorded our little single. And it was exciting. We were very nervous going to a studio. We'd never done that kind of thing before. And there was that feeling, and I talk about this in the book, that feeling that I never have anymore. But back then, when you were starting out, I assume other people have had this, when you're making your first record where you're getting halfway through the song and praying you don't fuck up.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God. I don't, please don't let me not be the one who hits the wrong chord on the third verse. And it wouldn't matter now because like, oh, we'll punch it in. But back then you're like, I don't want to mess it up. And you would just, all you could think about is not making a mistake, not, and I'm glad I don't feel that way anymore. But we did make that first Suspect single, and we think we pressed 500 copies and sent about 300 out to college radio stations, and sold about 30, and that was that. And then later, and that record, because of that we were novices, because we had that kind of inexperience, because we had that kind of fear, because we just didn't know what we were doing. It's an okay record. I hear it now, I'm kind of charmed by it, but none of us would have said this is the greatest record ever made. So a couple of years later, when I was living back in LA, and had actually gotten a little 4-track reel-to-reel recorder, a TX 3340, that I was really getting into working with and experimenting with the recording process. At some point I said, I don't want to, go to the grave saying the only record I ever made was this kind of mediocre Suspects record. So I'm going to make a new single that I can forever say was the record I wanted to make, because I'm never going to make another one, that's for sure. And I recorded what became the 15 Minutes single, and again 500 copies, and again sold probably about 30 or 40, and I said, okay, now I've done it. Now I've made a record that I can be proud of. When I have grandkids someday, I'll say, do you know what this is? This is how we made music back in the 80s, in the 20th century. So that was it. I just kind of wanted to have a good record that I could say that I made.
Mm-hmm. But
and then quickly the Dream Syndicate happened, and everything changed very quickly.
right. So you had to learn how to do the whole pressing, how the whole system worked. You probably discovered Rainbow Records is who pressed those records. Is that correct?
Not Suspects. That was some local, I can't even remember now. But yes, 15 Minutes was Rainbow, and that was, like I said earlier about the Dream Syndicate early stuff, that a lot of the knowledge at that point came from working at Rhino. I just
Right.
knew that down the street in Santa Monica there was a pressing plant, and they did records like ours, or did records like what I was doing. And I I even was able to front rack the single at Rhino.
Oh
it
yeah.
was, that
It's all who
I
you
didn't-
know.
It's all who you know, and I knew me, so that was great.
So perhaps the rarest release of your career, as far as my research shows. Any guesses as to what that is?
Rarest in terms of people trying to find it, or rarest in terms of number of copies?
Well, the rarest in terms of people, like if you were to have all your products out to collectors, the one that would garner the highest return.
I know the one I get asked about all the time that I didn't repress and not going to is my Bob Dylan cover CD, Steve Sings Bob.
Okay.
And that one, people ask about that one, that's long gone. But I'm guessing that's not the one you're talking about.
No.
Okay.
The one that I found, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I need to keep digging a bit more, is Baseball Project, the Broadside Ballads.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Never on vinyl. The
Never
CDs
on
go
vinyl.
for several $100s.
They do?
Yeah.
Holy cow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, you
Well,
better
we
find
gotta
find a
we gotta
box
put
of
out
those.
ourselves. Or put out ourselves, which we should do. I like that record a lot. That's actually, that's a fun record. I don't know why we haven't repressed it. We have the rights to that, so we should probably do that. I had no idea.
Yeah,
It's a good record.
It's
a good record.
it's only on CD so far. So that was one of the
Wow.
few releases I could find from you that
Yeah.
hasn't been on vinyl, and even the CDs, people go crazy for those.
Okay. I'm on the horn to my bandmate who lives in this apartment. So I will
Yeah.
Linda, let's press that up.
Band meeting.
Yeah, band meeting.
All right. Steve, I'm about to wrap it up. Is there anything you want to talk about we haven't talked about?
No, that was a good one though. That was a great. I like that because I didn't know that. I don't go on Discog. Is that a Discogs
Yes, yeah, yeah.
thing?
Well,
Okay.
that's part of it. I use a few other apps and data sources to kind of see what collectors are doing. But yeah,
Hmm.
that seems to be the one that is. Yeah, I was surprised too. It's like, see, $200 for a CD. Jiminy crickets. Oh man, Steve, thank you so much for joining us here and for being patient with the record nerd questions. You're a music nerd too, so you know where
I am,
it's
and I
coming
love it.
from.
I love it.
I want to make sure everyone knows Steve's got a solo album, Make It Right, available firerecords.com. It's on streaming as well. His autobiography, I wouldn't say it if it wasn't true, as well. It's a fantastic read, and I really enjoyed it. Again, I think your writing background really made it quite special. I read a lot of biographies and
Mm.
autobiographies, some of varying kind of ways of keeping my interest. This one was very, very interesting, very fun to read. A lot of information, details, and perspectives that I think record nerds would appreciate. You write as a musician and as a fan, and that totally comes through in the pages. I'll put some links in this episode page for it. There's a bundle at Fire Records where you can get both the album, a nice colored vinyl variant of Make It Right, as well as the book at firerecords.com. And I'll put that link in this episode page. Steve, you're welcome back anytime, mate. Love talking to fellow record nerds, and
All right.
I really do appreciate the work you've done and the perspective that you bring forward, mate. So thanks again for joining us.
Well, thank you, Nate. And I should point out, even though you can get these things at Fire Records, just go down to your favorite local record store and ask them to carry it because we all love record stores. So there you go, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Your independent record stores, if at all possible.
Independent record stores, go there. You know something we didn't even talk about the whole record store day thing, but I think people get cynical about it, but anything that gets people to record stores, despite my everything I just said in the last hour, I do think it's great that print stores still exist. So go down to your favorite local record store and say, I want to get Steve's new record, and they'll give you a big smile.
Yeah. And take the record store clerk some donuts too. They
Yeah,
appreciate
yeah.
that.
Yeah, maybe one or two. We want to stay healthy.
Yeah. 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 Bring them some kale. Uh,
There you go.
yeah. We got record store day. We should have look after your record store clerk day.
Yeah.
Uh, all right.
Pleasure. Great talking to you.
Oh man, fascinating dude. Fascinating dude. His book is really great. I wouldn't say it if it wasn't true. That's the title and my commitment as well. Again, links are in this episode page where you can get that. See Steve if he comes on tour. And of course, he's got a solo album, Make It Right. It's on all streaming services right now. Please check it out and enjoy. And that's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to everyone who is sharing these episodes online, putting them on Facebook and Reddit forums, sharing the pictures on Instagram and the stories. That is hugely appreciated. And those of you who are leaving positive reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, well, that warms the cockles of my heart too. Now, we'll be back shortly with a brand new episode. So until we talk next time, get out there and buy some records, people. Cheers.